Hello, everyone, and welcome to the ViewfindHer podcast. I am your host, Mya Saree Gray. I am a filmmaker, musician, and mother of two. Now, traditionally, on a camera, what you look through to see what you're going to take a picture of or video of is called the viewfinder. It's that little thing. Well, this is an old camera, but this is the little thing that you look through to kind of just see what you're going to take a picture of. So, on this podcast, I want to take you guys to see how I see the world through interviews with amazing people that are making a positive change in this world. With that being said, let's get started. Hey everyone, and welcome to the third episode of the ViewfindHer podcast. I'm your host, Mya Saree Gray, and today we'll be talking about mental health with psychiatrist Liz Bullard, who was also a part of the documentary I put out in March with Neighborhood Housing Services of Waterbury entitled I Want to Buy a House. And she's a recent home buyer, a Waterbury resident, and she's very active in the community. And I'm very excited to have her on this episode to discuss this word or this phrase called mental health, because I think it gets thrown around a lot. Currently, it's just like, oh, mental health. And I just want to give you a chance to introduce yourself, and then we can get right into the topic.
Well, thank you so much for having me on as a guest. As Mya said, my name is Liz. I'm a therapist and I work with children and families, as well as I'm a podcaster. And my podcast is Coffee and Combos with Liz, which can be found on podcasting platforms such as Anchor FM, Google, Spotify, and other platforms. And I'm just really excited to talk about mental health. Obviously, it is a passion of mine, and I think it's just really important to people, to the community, especially in this time of COVID.
Yeah, my first question is going to be basically the phrase, or the words mental health. What does it really entail, and does it involve like spiritual, like, is this, when I think of mental health, even for me, it's kind of like, oh, I'm doing this meditation for my mental health. I'm doing like, alleviating different things for my own mental health. So the question is to me, like, what is that? What is mental health?
So I pulled up the dictionary to see what is the dictionary definition, and then I'll give you my definition. And so what the dictionary says is mental health is a person's condition with regard to their psychological and emotional well-being. And I like that because it feels like it is transforming from taking it as a problem and putting it as like physical health, right? So you wouldn't just exercise when you're overweight or when the doctor says that you have diabetes. It's something that you do to prevent. And mental health is pretty much like that. So I think most people are familiar with mental health when something has gotten too heavy, too much, and someone is having a mental health disorder, which means that they have transitioned, and just say that anxiety, right? So all people have anxiety, right? It's what lets us know that there's danger, to watch out. We're running behind on a deadline. Let's pick this up. Anxiety becomes a problem when it stops you from functioning, when you can't get out of the bed in the morning, when you can't stop worrying, when you can't control the worry. And I think that's what people are most familiar with, when mental health stops you from functioning in your day-to-day life. But mental health really is just your overall mental well-being, how you're able to ground yourself, how you're able to function with the stressors and things of life. And sometimes you need the help of a mental health professional. Sometimes you do that, like you mentioned, the spiritual, by relying on the spiritual. Sometimes you need medication. Sometimes you need a combination of things so that your mental health is keeping you well.
Perfect. Thank you for that definition, that explanation. cleared it up for me too. Because, a lot of times it is associated with mental health, like when things go too far, like, like you
Mm-hmm.
said. Um, and I guess my follow-up question would be, what does it take to really keep your mental health in check and to know when you need to either uh, if because I don't know if you're familiar with I've heard the idea that um hustle culture, that it's kind of
Mm-hmm.
toxic, especially like with me, like being like trying to be an entrepreneur and trying to
Mm-hmm.
start the film business and everything. And I just constantly feel like I have to be doing something. Like for me, like I just feel like, okay, well, what am I doing now? Okay, well, what am I doing next? And I'm already like planning out 2 months ahead. Like that's just how I am. It's how I'm wired. And I don't think it's a bad thing, but I know sometimes it will get to me. Like, and I'll be like, wow, I'm so overwhelmed right now. And then if I don't like be like, okay, just relax, like what's right on your plate right now, then it can really be a stressor for me. So my question is like, what does it take to have a balance to be able to really take care of your mental health?
I love that question. And I love how you brought up hustle culture, because even if, kind of if you think about pre-pandemic, if someone said, well, I'm not doing anything today, they kind of got judged, right? It's saying that you were stressed, saying that you were busy was kind of the ideal. It was like, wow, that person is important. Meanwhile, they weren't really functioning that well, right? They may have been irritable, maybe depressed, anxious. And I think what's key is what you said is when you recognize that for yourself and you say, okay, I'm feeling overwhelmed. I need to relax. I need to focus on now. And we can sometimes get so much of that hustle culture, or we can let that feeling get so big that we're not able to do that anymore. We're not able to ground ourselves by ourselves, and we need help. And I think that's kind of the key when you're saying, like, okay, do I need to talk to someone? Well, like being honest with yourself. Are you having a hard time managing your stressors? Is it hard for you to get up in the morning? Do you feel depressed more days? Do you have thoughts of like self-harm or suicide, and it's starting to get hard to manage those things, right? And that's normal, right? Though, we're in a pandemic, jobs, economics, the stressors of life can feel overwhelming. And if you don't have an outlet for that, it can build. And so, to kind of answer your question, it's really thinking about you, and it's a very personal question. And when I'm about to discharge clients out of treatment, I'm always asking them, how do you know that you need to come back and talk to someone? And that differs for someone. Someone might say, well, when I can't sleep anymore. Some people say when I feel that, those physical signs, right? My heart is beating fast, and my palms are sweaty. Some people, that feeling of overwhelmed, and so again, it's a very personal question of knowing, how do you know that you're not okay?
Okay, so let me ask you this.
Mm-hmm.
Why should someone talk to someone like you, like a therapist? Because everyone says it, oh, the Black community, no one wants to get no one wants to go see a therapist because it's
Mm-hmm.
stigmatized. And I think
Right.
it's getting better, but I think that it is very much like that still. And I've even when this in my own family, my own circles, that frequently, and but the people that have, sought therapy, they have improved dramatically off a couple of sessions. So my question is, what's so what's the magic in talking with a therapist versus talking to a friend?
Mm. So I will start off by saying therapy isn't for everyone. And what I mean by that is, again, everyone needs something different. For some people, exercise, right? That's how they manage stress. Some people, it's writing, filmmaking, that creative side. So sometimes people don't need therapy, and sometimes you do. Sometimes your problems get too big. And with a therapist versus a friend, right? Your friend, right? They want you to feel better. right? And so they might say, you need to do this, you need to do that, or don't worry about it. And all those things are nice. And it's great to have a support system. But a therapist really creates that treatment plan. We really look and say, okay, just say, Mya, what is it that you want to work on? Do you want to work on sleeping better? Well, here's some techniques that you can do. We're someone that can hold you accountable. It helps that friend relationship not get messy, right? Because one, you have that confidential aspect. And two, your friend wants to be your friend. They don't want to be your therapist, right? They care about you. They want to support you, but it's not their job to make sure that you are mentally okay, in the sense of, we're going to create a plan. We're going to be that support team, and we're going to teach you skills so that way you can function the way that you want to function. So I'd say that's like the biggest difference, is the therapist helps you action plan. They hold you accountable. You could be a little bit more vulnerable because what stays there is, you say there is going to stay there unless you're going to cause harm to someone else or to yourself. So I think confidentiality is a big thing. And again, it's someone to be your team.
And how long have you been a therapist?
So I have been working as a therapist about 1.5 years. I interned before that. So like as a therapist, I'll say about 2 years. I've been in the field of mental health, human services for maybe about 10 years. It feels longer because when I was living at home, my mom did foster care, right? So you're constantly, seeing mental health, talking about mental health, engaging with social workers, therapists, all these different people. And then sometimes I feel like I've been in mental health since I was a kid, right? So seeing my mom be a caretaker to others, listening to others' problems, growing up in the church and seeing how the pastor uses spirituality to heal people for, their emotional health, their spiritual health. So I kind of feel like it's always been a part of me, but like professionally, I feel like about 10 years in the field, but as this role of a therapist, about 2 years.
Okay, yeah, that's perfect. It's crazy how, you mentioned growing up in the church and then your mom like doing amazing things like that, like sacrificing a lot to help other people. And do you think that like how do people like your mom and like pastors or people that are like community leaders like yourself just trying to make a positive change, how do they uh maintain themselves when overwhelmed with other people's problems sometimes and their own?
I mean, that's important because I think we look at leaders, and again, because we have that mental health stigma, right? So if someone in leadership, even like your pastor or something like that, were to say, well, I'd go and talk to a therapist, we kind of pause, right? It's kind of like, oh,
Yeah, definitely.
because we so associate mental health with sickness. And while mental health is a sickness, it doesn't have to get that far. It's again having that checkup mentality when mental health is concerned, saying like, okay, I'm going to make sure I go, just like you go to the eye doctor before you have an eye problem, right? You're doing those maintenance checkups just to make sure everything's okay. You go and get your physical, right? Using your mental health professional like that. And again, I know that's not easy because sometimes insurance is like, you cannot go until there is a problem. But sometimes people are fortunate enough to be able to pay for mental health services. And so they're able to kind of do that maintenance. And I think you're seeing a lot with like celebrities and celebrity culture prioritizing their mental health. So I think a good example is Simone Biles, right? So she noticed in her performance there was something different. And she didn't keep going. She didn't push herself. She didn't hustle. She said, I need to stop now. And I think that's the key when you are in a position of leadership, when you are in a high stress role, knowing when you're different, right? Knowing when something's off for you and not feeling bad to take care of yourself, which often I think, especially Black women are penalized for when we stop and we're like, I'm going to take care of me. It's like, oh, you're not strong. You're not this, you're not that. And so just knowing to prioritize yourself.
Yeah, another thing to follow up with that, like with Black women, it's kind of like, um, even historically, I watched a movie. It wasn't a documentary, it was a movie. And it was like not super budget produced. It was like a small budget produced movie, but it was pretty cool. Not cool, but informational about basically this black entrepreneur from like 1940, the 1940s, and in like Mississippi or something. He owned like a jukebox in like this town in the woods that was like very integrated. So there was blacks, whites, natives, and nobody was discriminated against. But something ended up happening where, you know, racist, leaders went after him, and his wife was basically like interrogated because
Mm.
he ran away, and that's his wife. So it just made me think of like a lot of times black women have to just um deal with different stresses as the comforter of unit of a family,
Mm-hmm.
and even just in general. If we do complain about things, we're stank, or we're ungrateful, or we're if we get too loud, we're ratchet. So
Mm-hmm.
uh I notice with me, a lot of times I just try to forget those stereotypes and just not worry about like what people are going to perceive if I act a certain way, if I say something a certain way. uh,
Mm-hmm.
so like when you said that, it just made me think of that too.
Right.
um
And that's not easy to do, to say, I'm going to shut down the noise and focus on me. I mean, you have to make a very conscious effort. And, same thing with mental health stigma. You have to make that conscious effort to shut down the noise. And it is hard.
Yeah, and do you think it takes like a certain amount of time to kind of focus on yourself, or you think it's something that you can just switch off and on?
Oh, no, I think it definitely takes time, because sometimes, when I work with people, they show up, but they're not ready to do the work. And the work is hard. It's hard to change things in your life. It's hard to put yourself first. It's hard to make space for therapy, right? So, whether that's making sure you're there for your weekly appointment, bi-weekly appointment, whether that's in doing the homework that the therapist gives you, whether that's just being not afraid to call and do the intake, I think it takes time, and it takes time for people to realize that you are worth it enough to make that space. The same way that others will say, hey, I can't show up for you because I have to do this or I have to take care of that. You have to do that for yourself. And it's hard. And again, that's a really kind of personal thing to say, what do you need to do? And for some people, it means shutting off your phone. For some people, it's, having that accountability partner, like a friend, to say, hey, like, girl, did you go to your appointment? Did you do that? So it's really saying, like, what do you need to make yourself a priority?
What would you say to someone who is a little bit hesitant about uh, prioritizing themselves because they don't want to be selfish, or they don't want to be perceived a certain way, but they
Hmm.
know that things are getting out of hand, and they just they want to improve that area of their life?
Hmm. So absolutely exploring the barriers. So asking, like, okay, what's stopping you from putting yourself first? And if they're like, well, I feel selfish, or, oh, my mental health isn't as big as someone else. The great thing about therapists is we use a lot of assessment tools. So when you come in for an intake, it's like, wow, you said your problem's not that big, but look at, you said you can't sleep nearly every day. You
Mm.
worry more than half the days. You've thought about self-harm, you've thought about all these things. So, even though you think it's not a big deal, your body's letting you know it's a big deal. Because that's the other part, right? Mental health doesn't just stop at the mind, it affects your body, right? So whether that's high blood pressure, whether that's um, all these different things, you can't sleep, you're fidgety, all these physical signs, your heart rate, all these things, you can't focus on watching TV, you can't be present with your kids. So kind of exploring, where is your mental health affecting your daily living, and using that as a way to say, like, even though you think it's not that big a deal, it's really showing up affecting all these other areas.
Yeah, Definitely. I really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation. It was very informational for me, and just a reminder to take care of myself and take care of others too, in my circle that I know that you may need extra support. Uh, can you just let the people know where they can find you, and also about Coffee and Convos with Liz, and as well as the therapy side of your work?
Absolutely. So, my goal one day is to have my own practice, and hopefully that happens one day soon.
You will.
And thank you. But I would encourage anyone, if you're even curious, shop around. The first therapist you talk to might not be your forever therapist. It might not even be the therapist that you want to talk to right now. But, ask your friends. You don't know. Your friends might know a therapist. Um, Out calling your insurance, they can give you a list, Googling, and really like talking and trying kind of interviewing as if you're doing a job interview. Um, so kind of stay tuned for more therapy stuff from the side of me. But if you're interested in politics, activism, and wellness, check out Coffee and Convos. You can find Coffee Convos Liz on Facebook and Instagram. I have a website called coffeeconvosliz.com, and my podcast can be found on podcast listening platforms like Spotify, Apple, Google. And again, if you're just like, oh, I can't find it anywhere, just go to the website. The episodes are there as well. And Maya, I'm so like glad we talked. And I'm just really excited for your podcasting and your film work. And, again, congratulations on, this new venture for you.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you again for being a part of the third episode. I've been featuring nothing but Black women, so maybe this is a theme. But yeah, thank you again, and I'll catch you guys in the next episode. Bye for now.